Meet Zeke Draker. He was born into the Draker household, a family directly descended from legendary Dragonslayers. However, his time to flex the family title was short-lived. He was soon abandoned because his family deemed him unfit. Apparently, his family wanted a swordsman, but Zeke turned out to be a cursed healer, someone no one cared about. In his pursuit of power, Zeke wandered across continents and eventually stumbled upon an ancient relic, a treasure even desired by the Emperor himself. But in the end, he was taken down by soldiers sent by the Emperor. The injuries inflicted were so severe that even his healing magic failed to assist him. Yet fate had other plans. The ancient relic he had stolen triggered an upgrade system that allowed him to regress to a younger age with these newly granted ancient powers awakened inside. And from this moment on, his real story begins at the Draker household's training institution, the Cradle. Before diving deeper into Zeke's story, it's important to understand the background of his family. The Draker family is one of the three great transcendent households. This renown stems from their ancestor, Tarakan Draker, the hero who saved the land 1,000 years ago by slaying the evil dragon Bahamut. It was Tarakan's victory that laid the... Perhaps due to their lineage, every descendant of the Draker bloodline has inherited the blessing of aura, allowing them to awaken high-level aura effortlessly and excel as knights. That is, until Zeke came along. Unlike his ancestors, he was born without the ability to wield aura, a deviation that cast him as an outcast within his family. The system window suddenly startles him, listening intently after hearing the unusual sound. However, after scanning the room and finding no one, he convinces himself he might have just imagined it. But then, a few more system windows chime in. Out of all the system windows, one particular system has the juiciest detail. It goes on to announce that Zeke's soul has received the will of the Elder Dragon, and it has been merged completely with his soul. Soon enough, Zeke is also granted authority over part of the system. And as soon as the activation is complete, his eyesight is swarmed by a plethora of system windows. The first window displays his overall stats, including his class, skills, and a unique skill category labeled Draconian Skill. This skill can only be unlocked once he accumulates 10 points, but his current karma points are 0. Curious, he begins fiddling with the system and quickly learns how to navigate and operate it. Among all the information displayed in the administration status window, what stands out to him the most is the class skill. The reason behind his curiosity is that this word, class skills, is a terminology from Draconic language that is not used in this current era. He has heard about this class skills from his master. According to his master, people of the ancient world classified themselves based on their strengths. Each class trained in specialized techniques referred to as skills. Since Zeke's class is that of a healer, his corresponding skill is called healing. After Zeke awakened, his master, who was female by the way, trained him relentlessly until he was on the brink of death. Her training methods were unusual, and he still remembers the unbearable pain she inflicted on him, just so he could heal it back. In any case, Zeke decides to verify if he is indeed a healer, just as the system claims. As soon as he activates his powers, he realizes that he is, in fact, a healer. He's surprised because, in his past life, the time he became a healer was in his 20s, right after his ether hall was unlocked. Since he can't possibly access his healing ability without his ether hall being unlocked, it clearly means that his ether hall has already been opened. This news is as good as it can get. Not only has he returned to the past with all his memories intact, but his skills have also come along. And this just puts him in an even more advantageous position. As he decides to explore the system further to see what other surprises are in store, someone calls out his name and knocks on the door. Quickly, he scrambles to push the system windows aside before anyone can see. However, the impatient visitor barges into the room without even waiting for a response. The man who just entered is Zeke's exclusive servant, Decker. He's apparently here to check if his young master is prepared for the event ahead. Of course, Zeke has no clue what he's supposed to be prepared for. This ticks off this terrifying man, and he is clearly annoyed by how careless Zeke seems. To think that the young master forgot about this special day is just pissing this butler beyond belief. The poor guy, on the other hand, begins to tremble instinctively under Decker's intense gaze. Now that Zeke thinks about it, he recalls that, in his past life, he was always afraid of Decker. Even though his mind is that of a 32-year-old, his subconscious can't shake the fear instilled in this body. Right at that moment, one of the class skills activates, known as Composed Mind. Almost instantly, all of Zeke's trembling, and any trace of fear that had been on his face fades away completely. Apparently, Composed Mind is a skill that ensures the user's mental state remains unaffected, no matter the situation, allowing them to maintain a calm and composed mind. Zeke finds it rather convenient that it can activate on its own. Meanwhile, the butler continues repeating himself, trying to remind his young master of the importance of the event ahead. However, Zeke doesn't respond immediately. After much insistence from the butler, Zeke finally starts paying attention and admits that he does remember. He clearly recalls the evaluation test, known as pancration. To understand what pancration is, a little context is needed. All Drakers go through a training system called the Cradle, starting when they're 7 years old. For 5 years, they undergo strict basic training. Every year, the instructors evaluate the incoming students through competitions in swordsmanship and combat, specifically pancration, a no-holds-barred combat with no rules. Opponents are typically chosen by the instructors, but on occasion, students may choose their own adversaries, provided both parties consent. Since there are no rules, injuries are common, and sometimes students don't make it out alive. But because this competition determines which class the students will be placed into within the academy, the children have no choice but to fight with all they have. The day of pancration finally arrives, and the students find themselves gathered in the amphitheater. At the center of it all stands the instructor, who reminds everyone that today is the day of pancration, and that it marks the final part of their evaluation. All the students eagerly affirm what the instructor has said, and seeing their enthusiasm, even the instructor is somewhat intrigued by the high spirits of the crowd. This man is actually the head instructor, Panmark, and without further delay, he decides to get things started. In the crowd, the students begin to notice Zeke standing among them. Some students find it laughable that Zeke is once again here after the humiliation he suffered last year. But while the other students find the quick fight fascinating, Zeke isn't impressed at all. He remembers the time when he, too, used to be terrified of such fights when he was younger. This is nothing. As Zeke yawns repeatedly while waiting for his turn, one particular student, Leon Conrad, is eagerly waiting for the moment to have a duel with our boy. Eventually, the time for Zeke's match arrives, and his opponent just so happens to be Leon. While my guy is rubbing his tired eyes, Leon throws a jab at him, instantly reminding the humiliation Zeke suffered the previous year. Well, of course, Zeke has not forgotten about it. He vividly recalls how he had begged Leon for forgiveness back then. Those memories are painful, but they're in the past now. Leon has always been Zeke's opponent every year. Our boy knows him all too well, how dirty of a player Leon is, and the kind of trash family he comes from. He is certain that the only reason he's facing Leon in this duel is because Leon pulled some strings behind the scenes to fix the match. Zeke would rather have a dog who bites, rather than having a cousin like him. In Zeke's past life, he was never able to meet his 4 siblings of direct bloodline, but there were more than a dozen cousins, and many of them were more than willing to bully him. Suddenly, Leon calls out to Zeke once again, and just like before, he tries to humiliate him by reminding him of the miserable defeat he suffered the previous year. He further questions Zeke whether that level of humiliation wasn't enough to keep him away from participating in pancration altogether. While Leon continues to throw one verbal jab after another, Zeke remains as cool as a cucumber, and it's all thanks to his composed mind ability. Although Zeke is calm and collected, there's still a limit to his patience. He won't tolerate some insolent bug bad-mouthing him repeatedly without consequence. Well, our boy's response only serves to trigger this bastard even more. And this time, Leon even goes so far as to grab our boy by the head. But his foolish move only earns him a solid punch to the face that sends him flying away. This brutal punch was possible thanks to Zeke's skill, Critical Strike. The ability inflicts significant damage to the opponent, and has the added risk of being countered if the attack fails. Fortunately for Zeke, this punch landed perfectly, leaving no room for a counter. The bastard, on the other hand, is writhing in agony, with his hand covering his own face. Zeke, meanwhile, reflects on how he only meant to knock the guy out and had no intention of activating this ability. The instructor quickly rushes to tend to the injured brat while scolding our boy for attacking even before the match began. But my guy just stays nonchalant in his response and wonders aloud why they had to wait for someone's command to start the battle when they're already standing in the arena. You see, the one who strikes first has the advantage, so he didn't shy away from taking this opportunity. While he says this, he looks absolutely menacing, and the sheer amount of killer intent he's exuding is enough to leave the poor instructor trembling. Meanwhile, Leon just assures the instructor that everything is fair game and tells him to just let the battle begin. After all, if Leon steps back on a moment like this, it would be way too humiliating to bear. As soon as the instructor gives the signal, Leon recklessly charges at his opponent. But his reckless charge earns him a punch right to the face. As surprising as it is, the punch Zeke landed didn't hurt at all. Initially, Leon was quite afraid of taking a direct punch, remembering how painful the first one was, but realizing this punch didn't hurt him at all only fuels his foolish confidence. All he has to do, he thinks, is put his guard up, and Zeke won't be a threat at all. Leon quickly notices our boy using his left hand for a counterattack again, so he ducks down. In that critical moment, he takes advantage of Zeke's vulnerability and takes him into his grasp in order to push him over to the ground. But suddenly, Leon takes a hit so fast that even we couldn't see what happened, leaving him trembling like a leaf. Even the instructor on the sidelines is completely boggled, unable to wrap his mind around the fact that he just witnessed a 12-year-old kid pull that slick move. The moment Leon dodged Zeke's counter and tried to take him down, the instructor was certain Leon was going to win. However, Zeke punched Leon square in the chin and escaped his grasp. But our boy, on the other hand, remained as cool as cucumber, despite the fact that his counter failed. The concentration and precision needed to inflict such exact and effective damage is a feat in itself. The instructor is actually wondering if this is really the Zeke Draker they thought they knew. The bratty bastard, however, is in shambles after taking that brutal punch. His brain is scrambled, and before he can even react, he takes another blow that causes him to trip. But he quickly steadies himself and retaliates with a punch of his own. At that critical moment, one of Zeke's class skills activates automatically, Heightened Sense, which temporarily enhances his perception. With this skill, Zeke can see the punch coming at him in 960 frames per second slow-mo, making dodging it a piece of cake. As soon as the punch zips past him, Zeke quickly grabs Leon's extended arm and slam dunks him hard onto the ground. And the impact was so brutal that it literally shattered the ground beneath. Another skill activates, known as Precise Stab, which helps Zeke target the Leon's weak points for critical damage. After pinning the bratty bastard to the ground, Zeke balls up his fist, ready to obliterate his face. Poor Leon begs him to stop, but my guy still goes through with it, landing the punch square on his face. He's glad that, thanks to this little show he pulled off, his other cousins will think twice before messing with him again. Not that it matters, though. If they dare say or do anything, he'll make sure to silence them for good. It seems that wasn't enough to instill fear in these incompetent bastards. One particular punk, too complacent for his own good, challenges our boy and picks him as his pancration opponent. This overconfident, cocky punk is Jaken Vardek, itching to make a statement, though he plans to let his blows do the talking. Well, Zeke doesn't mind at all. In fact, he's sure he'll get bored if Jaken comes alone, so he offers him the chance to bring a few other students along to make things more interesting. Our boy specifically calls out another student, Liam Stone, and suggests he join Jaken. Apparently, Liam is nothing more than Jaken's lackey. This suggestion feels like a slap in the face to Jaken. The very idea that he'd need someone's assistance to fight a brat like Zeke is a humiliation he just can't stomach. But Zeke keeps pushing his buttons, which only enrages this piece of flying trash even more. Jaken's seething now, eager to beat Zeke to a pulp. As both contestants stand in the arena, the instructor this time explicitly warns Zeke not to move before the command. Well, it seems like Jaken did bring his servant along after all, which only makes Zeke even happier. After all, in Zeke's past life, Liam had a reputation for being an exceptional fighter, even earning the title of Mercenary King. Back then, as Jaken's servant, Liam joined the cradle in the academy. However, being a distant relative, he was overlooked in education. He desperately begged to join higher education at Academy Valhalla, but ultimately ended up in the Knight Order of a small nation called Baranon. When Baranon eventually fell, Liam became a mercenary. In those chaotic times, the strong naturally drew followers. With his long tenure as a mercenary, Liam rose to prominence as a Red Knight, and eventually founded the Stone Mercenaries. He united the three largest mercenary groups, earning the title of Mercenary King. When the Empire hired the Stone Mercenaries, Liam entered the Continental Wars, where Zeke, along with the Northerners, faced him as a formidable foe. But this time, our boy is determined to carve out a very different future for himself. As soon as the instructor gives the signal, Jaken confidently lunges forward, delivering a punch with such force that it disturbs the air currents around him. But, not surprisingly, Zeke casually grabs and blocks the punch as if it were nothing. Jaken quickly flings our boy's hand away and retaliates with a kick of his own. But that kick ends up backfiring against this filthy bastard. As soon as his kick connects, Jaken feels an immense amount of pain, causing him to stumble. It turns out he hit Zeke's strong barrier, which was created around his elbow, and that caused serious damage to Jaken's leg. As Jaken looks at his injured leg, Zeke quickly lunges forward, balls up his fist with his skill activated, ready to throw it down. But poor Jaken quickly tries to protect himself, putting his hands over his face. Seems like Jaken miscalculated Zeke's moves a little, because our boy never intended to land a hit on his face. Instead, he tags the bastard right on his injured leg. After that sneaky move, he follows up with a punch to the ribs, one that's enough to make Jaken gag up copious amounts of blood. The overconfident bastard is finally on the ground. Left with no pride or dignity, he angrily instructs his sidekick to kill our boy right away. The time has come for our boy to deal with Liam, and this bastard is exuding some serious killing vibes as he strides toward him. The most annoying thing about fighting Liam is his insane reach, which puts Zeke at a serious disadvantage if he lets Liam attack first. So my guy takes his stance and decides to take the lead, throwing a few blows of his own. Using another skill known as Slash, Zeke moves so fast that all anyone can see are silhouettes throwing a barrage of punches. The skill Slash allows him to launch a relentless flurry of attacks at the enemy, completely interfering with the enemy's sight. The guys watching from the sidelines are feeling true despair, witnessing just how much of a gigachad our boy is. Zeke knows they're curious and confused because none of them have seen anything like this before. You see, in a place where sword dominates, seeing a brawler's fist-fighting technique is a rare and almost unheard of sight. As impressive as this ability is, it's also taking an equally heavy toll on his body. But even that isn't the biggest challenge here. The monstrous physique of Liam is what truly tests Zeke. No counterattacks, no dodges. Liam is just taking it all with his guard up, and now you can only imagine how aggressive he was during his time as the mercenary king. Since Zeke is unable to do any real damage, he prepares to unleash one final devastating strike, one that will be powerful enough to break through Liam's guard. As soon as our boy launches his strike, Liam effortlessly dodges it by redirecting it. What pisses Zeke off even more is that this bastard didn't even flinch or turn his eyes to see the strike. He just dodged it like it was nothing. In the next moment, Liam seizes the opportunity to make his move. Lifting Zeke high into the air, he prepares to slam him hard onto the ground. But Zeke isn't about to let that happen without a fight. He quickly strikes Liam over the head. His class skill, Heightened Sense, activates, and with it, he completely turns the tide. Using this advantage, he locks Liam in a deadly neck hold with his legs, cutting off Liam's air supply. No matter how strong Liam's body is, he's still powerless without oxygen reaching his brain. However, it seems Zeke overestimated himself. Liam retaliates brutally, landing one devastating blow after another. The relentless flurry of punches even forces the poor guy to gag up blood. But despite the barrage of hits, Liam's body finally begins to falter. His strength wanes, and eventually, he succumbs, losing consciousness due to the lack of air. The spectators are left in awe, their breaths caught in their throats at the sight of such a jaw-dropping battle. But among them, there's one particular student who, instead of feeling worried or shaken, seems oddly exhilarated. He's actually excited and can't wait to take on Zeke as his opponent. After the day of pancration was over, our boy returns into his quarters, where his servant inquires about his well-being. He has heard that Zeke was gravely injured during the matches. To this, Zeke just shrugs it off, claiming he's perfectly fine. However, the butler does not relent, and insists on checking his pulse to verify that everything is truly okay. Zeke can tell that this old coot just wants to check whether he has awakened his aura or not. Eventually, he extends his hand toward the servant, who quickly shoots a blue energy through his hand and into Zeke's. Seeing this blue energy makes our boy pause and wonder if his servant might actually be a blue knight. You see, when checking if someone has awakened, most people simply examine their dantian. But this man is being unusually thorough with it. Imbuing someone else with aura is difficult enough on its own. But for this old man to control it so precisely like this, he must be a blue knight. Apparently not all knights are the same. They are classified according to their martial prowess and aura manipulation proficiency. White swordsman is the novice level, and most children before the blessing rite are white swordsmen. A yellow swordsman is the level you attain once you've awakened your aura and opened your dantian. All trainees of the cradle become yellow swordsmen after the blessing rite. Once you've learned to freely control aura, you earn the title of knight. The purple knight level is when you can reinforce your sword with aura, while the blue knight level is achieved when you can manifest an aura blade. Beyond this, the realm of those who have transcended their limits, the realm the mercenary king Liam and our boy had reached before his regression, is known as the Red Knight. Then there's the Black Knight. But only a few of these monsters exist across the entire continent. With that in mind, Zeke can't help but wonder how someone as skilled as his servant, who is clearly talented enough to be a commander, ended up acting as his babysitter. Still, no matter what, Zeke is sure there's no way this guy can detect his ether, something only 2 people in the entire world can use. Finally, the old man finishes his examination. With a firm tone, he questions his young master, asking if he might be hiding something. Of course, Zeke plays it cool and feigns ignorance. He counters by asking if the butler perhaps knows something that even he doesn't. A moment of silence fills the room, but it's quickly broken by our boy, who just drops the conversation by claiming that he was just joking. The butler then hesitates but can't help himself and questions Zeke about how drastically he has changed. This makes our boy to halt his movements. He turns around with a glare in his eyes. The question his butler asked is entirely wrong. Instead of asking why Zeke has changed now, the butler should have been asking why it took so long for Zeke to change. He then informs his butler that many more surprises are yet to come, so there's no need for the servant to be shocked repeatedly. All he has to do is follow the commands. The humble servant acknowledges his master's words and bows his head in submission, ready to follow without question. The butler then reports that the training room Zeke had requested is already prepared and waiting for him. Zeke is pleased with the report and dismisses the old man to get some well-deserved rest. As our boy walks off alone, he has a nagging fear that his butler might have been ordered to keep an eye on him. To counter this, he decides it's best to keep the butler close, so he can manipulate the old coot and extract the information he needs. Zeke still has to figure out who ordered his butler to watch him. He's pretty sure that no one from his mother's side would dare do it, which only leaves his siblings. Once Zeke enters the personal training room, he's immediately struck by how lavish the place is, which only confirms that this household truly lives up to its name. Before starting his training, he decides to check the system. With a command, the system panel pops up in front of him. There, he notices that his slash skill has reached proficiency. He has no clue how it happened, but he makes a wild guess that it probably leveled up from using it repeatedly. The skill is naturally activated based on his actions, and he doesn't need to do anything in particular to activate it. From what he can understand, if he learns something new, it will likely be added here as a skill as well. He's still unsure about the difference between a skill and a class skill, though he does notice that they both activate similarly on their own. Lastly, there's the Draconian skill, but he can't view it yet because it requires 10 points to unlock. And the next system window informs him that he can earn karma points by killing monsters. His current karma points stand at 0. Speaking of monsters, Zeke reflects on how there are plenty of them in the dungeons, but he needs to be at least a purple knight to gain access. For now, though, he's more curious about why he regressed to the past and what this system is all about. The concepts of skills and class skills are also something in his curiosity list. At the back of his mind, he has a nagging feeling that all of this might be connected to that ancient relic. However, he can't be certain since he doesn't have enough information to piece everything together. Whatever the case, he grabs his sword and decides to use everything at his disposal to grow stronger, whether it's the system or the Draker lineage. In this world, there are two known powers, the aura of the knights and the mana of the mages. Knights reinforce their aura in the dungeons, while mages refine their mana through circles. The two powers are at opposite ends of the spectrum, meaning if one has awakened one power, they cannot awaken the other. However, Zeke was unfortunate enough to awaken neither a Dantian nor a circle. This inability led to his abandonment by the Draker household, forcing him to wander aimlessly until he met his master during his vagabond days. His master taught him many things, but the most valuable lessons were the art of healing and the Ether Hall, a unique technique his master had developed. Through the Ether Hall, Zeke learned to harness the energy of nature, known as ether. To this day, he and his master remain the only ether users in the world. After only 2 hours of training, Zeke feels as though he's about to collapse. However, his class skill healing activates in tandem with another class skill, Vigor Recovery. Healing is an exceptionally rare skill, one Zeke hadn't even known existed before meeting his master. If others were to witness him using it, they'd brand him an irregular. That's why he refrained from using it during his fight against Liam, and had to rush to heal himself the moment he returned to his room. After his body recovers to full strength, Zeke decides to continue practicing. He knows he cannot afford to waste even a moment. By dawn, Zeke looks utterly exhausted after relentless training. The entire hall bears the evidence of his efforts, with deep gashes scarring the floor and trails marking where his sword struck. Anyhow, a week passes by, and we find ourselves in Cradle Cafeteria. There, Zeke overhears some students talking about him. They think he's turned into a completely different person now. Since he is a born loser, they assume he might have dabbled in black magic. Meanwhile, in another private lounge, all the big shot students are having dinner together. The first one chowing down on steak is Raina Tarun. Then there's this guy, Owen Zimmons, calm and composed. And across from him sits a beaten-up Leon, looking as rowdy and impatient as ever. Owen tries to tell him he should eat properly because he'll need the energy for the swordsmanship duel. Leon, on the other hand, gets ticked off for no apparent reason, and smashes his hand so hard on the table in frustration that the juicy steak he was served unnecessarily falls to the ground. Because of this table slam, even Reina's piece of steak jumps off her plate and falls, leaving her totally enraged. Her intense glare finally humbles Leon a little. Apparently all 4 of these students seem to hate our boy, so it's not surprising they're together. But even though they're in the same group, they don't seem to get along all that well. The only thing keeping their relationship intact is their shared resentment for Zeke. Owen admits that Zeke was both brave and impressive during the pancration. However, he's convinced he will be pathetic when it comes to swordsmanship. As far as he knows, Zeke doesn't even know how to hold a sword properly, so he's no threat to anyone. One of them points out that Zeke is so weak he had to get a customized sword because the basic ones were too heavy for him. Still, it doesn't make sense to Leon that he lost to that inferior piece of shit. He's convinced Zeke only won against him in Pancration because of pure luck. Well, it looks like Reina doesn't share the same thoughts. If they actually believe this nonsense, then none of them have the right to be knights of the Draker household. With those words, the lady leaves the room.